Support for Jeff Needs Sports is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you with the best tools for your grooming experience. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. We have an exclusive offer for my listeners today. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code JHUNT. That's capital J-H-U-N-T at manscaped.com. Welcome back to Jeff Needs Sports, everyone. This is another edition of Icons presented by Off the Ball Network. Tonight is a celebration of the legendary career of Kobe Bryant.
With the 13th pick in the 1996 NBA Draft, the Charlotte Hornets select Kobe Bryant from Lower Merion High School in Pennsylvania.
He definitely is in the top 10 players of all time. No question about it.
He's the best player in the game?
Oh, hands down.
He's the best player in basketball, and I don't think it's even close.
He has some of the best skills that the NBA has ever seen in history.
Honestly, I look at Kobe Bryant as that guy that is the best, one of the best in our league.
It's just that simple. There's nothing that Kobe Bryant can't do.
But what he did for the game of basketball was simply legendary.
Kobe Bryant is a worker, and he's made himself the best. And I can guarantee you, if they have practice tomorrow, he'll be the first guy there as well.
Kobe, I think, is one of the greatest competitors in the history of the game. His performance was so awesome that you can't help but respect it.
I've got to take Kobe Bryant.
I like Kobe Bryant even better.
One time, one game, I'm taking Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant is the best player in the world.
Welcome to the Kobe Show.
Hey, welcome everybody. And joining me tonight is one of my Off the Ball Network teammates and one of the sharpest, smartest basketball analysts I know, Mr. Stephen Gillaspie from the Breaking the Game podcast. Stephen, how are you tonight?
Jeff, I'm doing excellent. First off, I just want to thank you for your kind words. You're far too good to me. That's why I keep coming back. You're the only person that's nice to me. So I mean, it's nice to be wanted. But that Kobe intro, man, that was hit me in my feels. I mean, it's just, I know that we're celebrating him. It's just it's hard to break it away. But man, just I'm so excited for the show.
Yeah. You were the only person. I know how much Kobe's career means to you, how much his personality, a lot of things he did mean to you. So you were the only person I could have come on to do this show. And this is truly a celebration of his basketball career, everybody. If you're listening, we understand the tragic end and everything. But full disclosure, I'm just not super comfortable about talking. A lot of families were involved in that, and it's just not my place. So tonight is a celebration about the historic career and on the basketball court, and just the way he played and what he meant to the game of Kobe Bryant. Pretty excited about this one. It's one of those, Stephen, again, and this happened with the Allen Iverson one I did a few weeks ago. Once I dug into the research, I just became just blown away. Like I couldn't believe, what I was reading, what I was seeing. And, I go back and listen to a lot of old interviews to try and get a feel for the person. It was truly an amazing experience. And by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, man, this could be a 3 or 4 part series. This one's it's special. This is a true legend. It's a true legend of sports here. So,
and we're talking, the title of this, theme of series that you're carrying on is Icons. And we talked about Allen Iverson, fellow class of the 96 draft, Kobe
which
Bryant.
Is amazing.
It's just, and I know you didn't plan it out that way. I know you weren't like, let's just roll out the 96 draft class first. But I mean, it's just, when you talk icon, like, it really doesn't get a whole heck of a lot bigger than Kobe Bryant, man.
No, it doesn't. And I'll get into my complicated history, with Kobe a little bit as we go along. And I mean like not that me and him we didn't know each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I'll just go down. Just it was hard to pick, just certain, stats or highlights or whatever from Kobe. So I'll just kind of go down some of them that stood out, and then we'll take a journey through his, his timeline, his basketball timeline, and work on the finer points. But so LA Laker shooting guard from 96 to 2016, 20 years on one team, already unheard of. 18-time All-Star, 12-time NBA All-Defensive Team, which I think is really important and possibly overlooked.
Of course.
Five-time NBA champion. The 07 08 NBA MVP, his only MVP. So that we'll touch on that a little bit later. One MVP for Kobe Bryant, two times finals MVP. His career averages were 25 points, 5.2 rebounds, 4.7 assists. He also, was up there in steals. But at some point with Kobe, he was such a well-rounded player. I had to cut it off. So that's typically what you see listed for a player. 48,637 minutes played, which is 8th all time, unheard of for an athletic shooting guard. But he did it. 33,643 points, 4th all time. This is the one I always try to make my last stat one that really jumps out. He started 200 playoff games and averaged 25.6 points, 5.1 rebounds, and 4.7 assists over 200. That was 200 starts. I believe he actually, his team played 220. Kobe in the first, couple years of his career didn't play a lot, which is kind of fascinating.
Yep.
We who knows as we get into this once again, I'm trying to stay on track here.
Yeah, I know
it's really hard with a career like this.
You can go so many different ways right from the jump.
It's amazing. So before I get to the career timeline, I always ask my guests this: what's your particular connection or attachment to Kobe Bryant?
I'll get into that, Jeff, but I want to continue with where you left off. I just want to throw out another couple things. So Kobe Bryant, as of right now, is 4th all time in career points, 31st all time in assists, 107th all time in rebounds, 16th in blocks. He has 2 scoring titles to his name, and he has made the set. If my stats are correct, he's 17th all time in career made 3-pointers.
Yes, you're right. I'm glad you did that because I thought I was going to go too deep and put all those up there.
I'm a stats guy.
He is essentially above 20 in almost every NBA stat that there is, and it just doesn't make it rattles your brain to what this guy did over a period of time. And he had seasons in there to where we'll talk about later. Yeah, his scoring was off the charts. He probably could have done whatever he chose to do on the basketball court. This is the player that he chose to be. We talk about Allen Iverson a little bit to compare a couple of these 96 guys. Allen Iverson was a particular type of player, but I don't necessarily know that Allen Iverson had the choice that Kobe did. Kobe decided what type of player he was going to be, and he did it at his best. If he wanted to be a facilitator, he would have been a LeBron James type facilitator. If he wanted to just be a 100% lockdown defender, which he was a really, 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 really good defender. I don't mean that, but he could have just said, I'm going to be the best defender that anybody's ever seen, and probably only given up a few points. The guy, he had, it's this rare mix of talent meets want to, meets drive, meets determination, meets education, meets determination. When all that comes together is when you get a guy like, Kobe Bryant, that really was the whole package. And that same mentality caused most of his troubles through we're going to call it troubles through his NBA career, because he could never really comprehend guys that didn't think that way. And for a long time, I thought this was BS. I was like, okay, yeah, we know you love basketball more than everybody, blah, blah, blah. I mean, just full disclosure. And I'll explain why soon. And then as he got older, I'm like, no, this is legit. This guy's a bit different. And then especially the last 2 championships, which I called the Kobe years in our notes. And then, when I really started digging into the interviews, I was like, oh no, this was legit. This guy is made a little different, had a different mentality. And maybe there are certain guys that maybe like a sport or try a little harder or put in a little more effort. And, it really kind of brought me around of here's my biggest thing. I really come away and I thought about this as he got older and retired. I really came away with some regret that I didn't appreciate the career that Kobe had as a basketball lover. And I think that's common. It's not that I didn't think he was good, just something didn't stick with me. So before we get started here, I want to touch on that. Why do you think, and I think, is it simply a West Coast, East Coast thing? Why did Kobe not, it's hard to say he didn't resonate, because with players he did, but he just never jumped to that Space Jam level of player. And I could never quite figure out why, for someone that's arguably a lot of people would say he's the third best basketball player we've ever seen. Some will say he's the second best basketball player ever. I'll get your answer later in the show, but why do you think, what do you think kept Kobe? What was that separation there between him and the masses?
So my thing is, growing up as a sports fan and a basketball fan, I was really big into, Phoenix. Phoenix was my team. I'm from the state of Arkansas. They had a guy growing up, Joe Johnson, went to University of Arkansas, ISO Joe, and they just so happened to start playing some of the best basketball that I've ever seen. But I've watched basketball before then, and I think you're more susceptible at the time that I was growing up with his career, basically. Hearing things like there's a right way to play basketball, and this, we're talking in the 90s where, we joke about this all the time, where, Michael Jordan got hit by a moving truck in the finals, spit out his kidneys and hit the game-winning free throw. Like the people played basketball the right way then, and positions were positions. You had a role depending on what your position was, and this is in the late 90s, growing into the 2000s. This is where we started seeing more isolationist style basketball. You had your isolationist specialists in the early 90s and the 80s, but there was more that, team personified concept. And so Kobe Bryant basically ushered in what we would later start calling hero ball, where the best player had the ball in his hands no matter what. We grew up thinking that Kobe Bryant was a ball hog, but I just read he's 31st all time in assists. So, I mean, he's doing something right to be unselfish. But I think it was just kind of an in-between eras. He came in as, we saw peak Michael Jordan, and you see a lot of similarities. I don't know how many times I've seen these montages where it'll be Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan side by side, and it looks like you have the same, jump shot package in 2K, the same layup package in 2K, the same dunk package in 2K. The jersey biting, the tongue sticking out, the scowls, the fist pumps. Everything was just, Michael Jordan. And people even now will argue that Kobe Bryant did it better, but MJ stole our hearts. You know what I mean? Like there can only be one, real love. And I think a little bit of that has to do with it, because Vince Carter, coming through the University of North Carolina, was supposed to be another next Michael Jordan. Didn't really work out for him. Still had a great career. But Kobe Bryant, I feel like, really, I won't say threatened, because there can only be one MJ, but he put a little bit of that, like, could this possibly be Michael Jordan 2.0? Like, and depending on which fan base you ask, it's not just Laker fans either. There are people that just love Kobe. There's Laker fans, there's Kobe fans, and then there's, Laker fans that are Kobe fans. There's 3 different camps for this. Like I said, I grew up being a Phoenix fan, so I couldn't stand the Lakers and I couldn't stand the Spurs, but I sure as heck respected Tim Duncan, and I sure as heck respected Kobe Bryant, because I knew that they were going to ruin my night.
You know what? And I'm glad it's, once again, that's why I had you on the show. This is exactly my mentality on this. I think that he was so close to Jordan, and that's actually, it's one of my questions for later in the show, but we'll cover it now. I think he was so close to Jordan, and as a Jordan guy, like I was. Me too. I was nobody will ever be better. And I did. You said the word threatened. I can remember one example. Jordan's last All-Star game, he was playing for the Washington Wizards. He makes.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah, he makes what I thought for 10 seconds was the game-winning shot in the All-Star game in a Wizards uniform. Last time I'm ever going to see Michael Jordan play a game that I cared that he played. And Kobe Bryant, they inbound. Kobe Bryant makes the exact same shot to win the game, in his face. And I can remember being so upset. And that's exactly why I felt so threatened that Kobe was
he was encroaching on Jordan.
Yes, he was encroaching on Jordan. I couldn't believe that this close to, I mean, imagine right now if we'll say the perfect example would be of Zion Williamson. If he's as good as LeBron right now, like we would all start questioning everything we've thought about LeBron. And that's what happened with the Kobe and Jordan. And me in particular, I didn't love Shaq. And to think now with modern basketball that we thought this was too much of a, too good of a team at the time. Like, they Lakers drafted Kobe Bryant sorta, and they took Shaq as a free agent. Now people would lose their minds because this is nothing. I mean, this would be considered doing it the right way. But you're right. There was just always a disconnect, but it was weird. It is a generational thing because I remember my son, being, 7, 8, 9 years old and really liking Kobe Bryant, and me being like, really, Kobe? Like there was always, and I think if Kobe plays for the Knicks, the Sixers, or something like that, it's probably a different story.
Bulls.
And yeah, exactly.
Could you imagine?
I really think that the same mentality that made him a winner, it rubbed people the wrong way because you know as well as I do in any walk of life, if you just carry yourself like I don't quote unquote need you, like I'll do it my way, blah blah blah, people get turned off by that. It's just the way it is. You can call it, they can call it arrogant or whatever, but when he came into the league, he knew his path. Like he knew how he was going to do it, and he stayed true to it, and it worked out perfectly for him. But I think it also just kind of grinded on people, and it was a lot of misunderstanding, if we're being honest, because what sports fans say they want out of an athlete is what Kobe Bryant gave them. Everything that they say they want out of an athlete, Kobe Bryant gave them, and it was just a disconnect there.
Well, look at what we see in today's NBA too. When I say this gentleman's name, I'm not saying that he is Kobe, and it's a shame that we have to have conversations in sports like this now, right? But he doesn't compare in play style. He doesn't compare in play style, but personality wise, what did we hear about Jimmy Butler when he played in towards the end of Chicago, in Minnesota, in Philadelphia, then he signed that lucrative contract to go play in Miami. It was locker room poor teammate, all this other stuff. When he was surrounded by like-minded individuals, we loved him.
Yep.
We were like, oh, he's a top 10 player in the NBA all of a sudden because we love his personality in this one isolated spot. Kobe Bryant didn't really. It's weird because in LA, it was obviously loved, but like everywhere else we saw other teams that we felt were just as good, San Antonio and Phoenix in that same Western Conference. They played a more what we'll call team friendly basketball. The ball was passed 7 or 8 times before, a shot was made, whereas Kobe Bryant may hold the ball for 2 or 3 seconds to let his teammates get set, figure out what's going on, run off the elbow, maybe back down a player.
They ran the triangle. I mean, it was a different. He ran it perfectly,
like Michael Jordan did. Another similarity there.
It's just amazing. So okay, let's get into it here.
Sure.
These shows are wonderful. It's just amazing. So we'll start kind of just making our way through the career here. 13th pick in the 1996, the historic 1996 NBA draft by the Charlotte Hornets. And honestly, I bet there's still a lot of people that don't realize that because it's been so long ago. 13th pick by the Charlotte Hornets gets traded on draft night to the Lakers. Jerry West was enamored with Kobe Bryant. The entire he had a target on him the entire time. Could
Mhm.
not. All they traded him for Vlade Divac.
That was a
With
big deal for
It was a
Laker
huge
fans.
deal because Kobe was not a known entity when he came into the league. Obviously, he got drafted 13th. Iverson went 1, Ray Allen went ahead of him, Marcus Camby went ahead of him. It's truly amazing. This is the funny note from that draft. Kobe was 17 years old. His parents had to sign his first contract with him. I believe it was 2 months after he got drafted when he turned 18. So Kobe Bryant got drafted at 17 years old. This doesn't even make sense.
Well, you know what's funny about when I read this and I'm thinking, it just goes to show you how different the era of basketball is. I'm not going to say which is better. I'm not going to do that. But Jeff, the reason that Kobe Bryant was drafted 13th in 96 is because we valued, and I say we being NBA analysts, general managers, what have you, we valued guys who we had more of a sample size from.
Yep.
Guys who played in high school hadn't really done it before. They had what we affectionately refer to as red flags because level of competition, is he mature enough to handle a grown man's game?
At 17-year-old, that's slightly understandable.
But here's where I'm going with this, Jeff. All these question marks now, you know what that's called in today's NBA? Potential. Yeah. Now, the younger you are, the higher you're going to be picked. So if he come out in this year's draft and we like, wow, this kid's 17 years old and he's playing this good at high school, imagine how great he's going to be 3 seasons in, and he still won't even be old enough to drink alcohol yet, So like he would be taken so much higher just because he would be mentioned among the same, mentioned in the same conversation as other guys. And he's just 17 years old. So we're going to take him higher because that means something more in today's NBA.
Yeah, it was a different time, and it was coming off a big run for the high school guys. Garnett went the year before, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a run. This was a weird time in the NBA, a crazy time. Well, I mean, this '96 draft's historic as far as the underclassmen, the high school kids that came out. It's
one of the best classes ever.
To me, it's the greatest draft ever. I know it's between 84, 96, 03.
03, those are your ones.
But I think, and I'm biased, outside of the good play, 84 is pretty historic.
84 is pretty daggum good too.
It's hard to get past 84, but 96 is just it. 96 changed the basketball world. I mean, Allen Iverson, Kobe Bryant were in the same draft, and we talked about in the Iverson episode. And we'll go the other way here. Iverson went one direction, with the way he was going to play the game and try to win. Kobe went a completely different direction. He had more of a, Iverson was I'm gonna die on my shield every night for this team. But he was, in all honesty, Iverson was a bad teammate as far as he's a great player, but he was not a good teammate. He did not make his team better, night in and night out. He never evolved his game. He did what he needed to do to get that win on that night. As to where Kobe, his career arc was, how do I get better? How do I get better? There's a story. I can't remember the year, Steven. Maybe you remember. He broke his right hand. All summer all summer he practiced as if he was left-handed.
Yep.
So when he came back that season, I can't remember either.
It's gonna bother me.
Early 2000s. So he comes back that season, and all of a sudden he's one of the best offhanded players in the league, because that was just the type of guy he was. So, not to keep comparing him to Iverson, but just that 96, draft is a difference. So a question for you on the 96 draft, Kobe being traded to the Lakers that night obviously changed the history of sports. It just did.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do the what ifs here real quick. These are fun. Me and Couch Coach did some of them, but we'll do some of them with you too. But is that the biggest draft night trade in history?
I mean,
I'm not an expert on these, but what's bigger than Kobe Bryant going from Charlotte to the Lakers? I can't think of one.
I got one.
Okay.
That might rival it. I'm not saying it's better, but I have one that'll at least rival it. The Dallas Mavericks once upon a time traded Robert Traylor for Dirk Nowitzki and Pat Garrity. They then flipped Pat Garrity in a package to bring in Steve Nash.
That's huge.
So if you're talking about highest level player, I think Kobe gets the nod over Dirk. But if you're talking, you somehow turned Robert Traylor into Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash.
That's impressive.
That's pretty daggum good as well.
The only reason I'll still give Kobe the edge is only because he went to LA and what happened in LA, and Charlotte lost their team.
Yes.
Do you agree? Me and Couch Coach Live both agreed. Charlotte doesn't lose a team if Kobe Bryant stays there.
There's no question. There's no question about that. Kobe Bryant would not, I don't think, like, I'm not going to say he would walk in the front office and be like, you're not trading or moving my team. I just think that the draw that he would bring, the level of competitiveness that he would bring. But I don't know. It's one of those things where you like to say for certain it doesn't happen. But I mean,
yeah, I'll go ahead and say it's for certain. And it reminds me of when, Jordan went to Chicago. Chicago wasn't a storied franchise.
No.
And he went there and he made them the biggest brand in the world. I think Kobe, there's nothing that Kobe did that makes me think that he needed a particular situation. A lot of players are like, right play. We talk about Steve Nash in this draft, had a Hall of Fame career. If he goes to the wrong situation, I don't know that he has the same career. As to where Kobe, I really don't think it mattered where Kobe went. Kobe goes to Cleveland Cavaliers. He's got 2 rings.
I think Nash travels well, but your point is taken.
But I'm saying as far as great as he was, I think even Nash would have some, let's talk about Steph Curry. If Steph Curry goes to the wrong team, he's not the Steph Curry that we know now.
Hands down.
But he's a legend. As to where Kobe, I really do not think it mattered where Kobe played basketball. They were going to be very, very successful. That's the kind of player I think he was. So we talked about it here. His first few years, he didn't play a ton. It was pretty crazy. I listened to some cool interviews with him, and he wasn't happy about it. He was watching these other guys like Iverson could do whatever. And I'm telling you, in that 01, the 01 finals, nobody could tell me that Kobe there was no way he was losing that to Iverson, by the way, because he was bitter about these guys, the other 96 guys, and Ray Allen and Iverson and those guys getting the playing time. And he was riding the bench, and he essentially finally got in because of injuries and circumstances. And obviously, the rest is history. But, he had another – he guesses he had another 3,000-4,000 points, wasted in the league, which was pretty wild. But that's the kind of chip he carried on his shoulder, even though. So let's get into the three-peat. So,
okay.
So in the 96, 96 that's when Shaq went to the Lakers, correct?
In 96.
96.
Let me check that out. I think if not, I think it's the year after.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it could have been.
Let me take a look here.
The Lakers were pretty good. Kobe.
Yeah,
Bryant.
that was the year. Yep, that was year 4 Shaq. You're 100% right.
So the Lakers have got Shaq. They've got Kobe now. So Jordan. Everybody got to remember Jordan's still in the league, and they're the best team in the league. So 96, 97, 98 is the Bulls. We had the odd strike season. Or the lockout season.
Lockout, yeah. One of 4 lockouts in NBA history. Yeah.
Yeah, that which is a weird season. The Spurs won it. So in 2000, here we go. From 2000, 2001, 2002, we have the three-peat.
Yes.
This was Kobe and Shaq at their primes. Things are rolling, the Robert Horry years, like everything comes together, and they put 3 championships in a row together. I just got to ask, how good were these teams? Just in your,
I mean, they three-peated, so that certainly speaks to it. But I mean, if you look at what Kobe and Shaq just by themselves, we'll talk about their teammates here in a minute. But Shaq rattling off triple doubles as a center, look at what we're doing with Nikola Jokic, and rightfully so this season.
Yeah,
Shaq didn't do it all year long, but I mean, my goodness, in the finals and in the playoffs,
his playoffs were. Yeah.
And he was getting blocks, and he was doing it all. He was phenomenal. I mean, we're talking about Superman, the Diesel, one of the most, if not the most imposing forces in NBA history.
Fair.
Meanwhile, we have young Kobe Bryant, who by his own right is an athletic freak. And I think that so many fans today are robbed of what we saw with some of these younger guys, not only just Kobe, but like even Ray Allen, young Ray Allen. People will only talk about him as a 3-point shooter, but this dude you would jam it over the top of your head.
Yeah, he was great. Yeah.
But Kobe Bryant, same thing. I mean, dunk contest winner. I think that was one of the accolades that we didn't mention earlier on. Like, he won a dunk contest. Would attack, would run that triangle offense as a perimeter player with Phil Jackson being his coach. We saw how successful it was with Michael. Again, the great, career paths are paralleling, each other at this point. And Kobe was, passing, rebounding, assisting, scoring, everything that you could want, defending very well. Those two were doing it all. And then if you look at the 99-2000 Lakers roster, they got my guy, Derek Fisher, another Arkansas guy. He went to UALR, the Trojans, as
another 96 guy.
Another 96 guy. He was drafted in that same year with Kobe. He ran that point guard. And what was interesting about what we saw kind of shifting towards modern basketball was that it was okay for your point guard to just be a defensive-minded first guy and a spot-up shooter. That's what we started seeing in these mid-90s to early 2000s. The point guard didn't have to be the one facilitating the ball. In the triangle offense, if you could shoot, pass, and play defense, you were fine, right? So you had Derek Fisher. You had Rick Fox, the movie star, right? Like he's been in a lot of movies, a lot of commercials, things like that. But he was a good defender, and he could hit from deep too. Ron Harper, I don't know the last time that I've looked at an NBA championship winning team that Ron Harper wasn't on the roster.
Ron Harper.
Outstanding defender. His offense was historically overlooked. I feel like, there was once upon a time where Harper was a very imposing scorer, but as his career dwindled, he was looked to more as a vet who can defend his tail off. Robert Horry, this guy, it might be the GOAT based on number of rings won. The master of the clutch shot. Played in Houston, played in San Antonio. Another guy, anywhere that there's a championship won around this time.
He's another guy. When he was in Houston, he was an active player. Like he was really athletic. A lot of highlight reel dunks and stuff. The fact that he became this great shooter is one of the odder things in NBA history.
Yeah, and again, combo forward, we started seeing the evolution of NBA positions at this point too. Tyronn Lue now coaching the Los Angeles Clippers. You talked about Allen Iverson in the last Icons episode. He's famous for being stepped over when he's on this team. Glenn Rice, another great 3-and-D guy. Again, we're starting to see modernization in NBA positions here. John Sally, another guy who's been on a number of really talented teams, and Brian Shaw. So that's a really talented, deep roster with vets that know how to play, and they knew their
almost perfect roster.
Of course. And what else could you want for an ascending Shaquille O'Neal and ascending Kobe Bryant to be surrounded by tough-nosed, knew their role, savvy veterans to help make them look the absolute best that they possibly could.
Yeah, and it's the stunning stat of all time in basketball. The 2001 LA Lakers went 15-1 in the playoffs.
Yes.
This doesn't. I would imagine that every one of those players still regrets that one loss because they never should have lost one to Philadelphia. Credit to Allen Iverson. It's crazy. Allen Iverson's championship moment is winning one game in the NBA Finals. The Lakers went 15-1 in that.
And how many players that they stunted from being viewed even higher. Chris Webber is still not in the Hall of Fame because he went all of these championship runs. Chris Webber he tried his absolute best to get past this team. There was a couple seasons where they gave him all they could handle, but Chris Webber is viewed entirely different if one of these rings doesn't go this way.
And, this era of basketball, the NBA, the early 2000s really gets shunned. But Sacramento, LA, San Antonio were really, really, really good teams.
Yeah,
San Antonio has 2 more championships. Phoenix has a championship with
Dallas might be looked at better too.
It was the West
Utah.
The West was awesome. Now, I will admit that and this is always this. Okay, so here's the black mark on this LA Lakers three-peat is who they played. We all know that they played what the Nets what was it? They played Philadelphia, the Nets.
Mm-hmm. They played who was it? They played the Nets. Yes, Indiana was the first one, and then Philadelphia, and then New Jersey.
Yeah, and this is coming off the Michael Jordan run as to where everything was compared to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we would have to go back and watch those games to try and guess how good those teams were. They just get looked at as they were terrible because they didn't have a Kobe Bryant. So everybody always says the Lakers walked through those finals, but what they forget is what they had to go through in the West to get there.
Yeah, and that was a stout Western Conference.
The Sacramento teams were really, really good teams.
Yeah, but like you said, that 2000-2001 season, the only time they lost in that stretch was the one game against Philadelphia. So even though they swept all those teams, those were pretty incredible teams. I mean, Portland was kicking around at that time too. Some really deep Portland teams.
Yeah, that was the Sheed teams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was just I've realized as I've grown older that that's one of the best teams the NBA has ever seen. I did a list, maybe I think it was last year sometime, and I'm like, yeah, this was one of the best. They're up there with the '98 Bulls and the some of the couple of the Warrior teams, whichever one you want to pick out of the Warrior teams. This team they had, you named it. That roster is perfect. They had everything.
It didn't really graduate much. I mean, if you look at 01 or the 2000-2001, they had Devin George was another great defensive minded guy. Yeah. Who else? Mark Madsen, the world's greatest cheerleader. Isaiah Ryder was on that team. And then the 01-02 season, the last one of the three-peat, they added Mitch Richmond and Lindsey Hunter, Lindsey Hunter is an NBA champion on the Detroit Pistons a couple seasons later. So
Lindsey Hunter was a really good ball player. Yeah.
I love Lindsey Hunter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and then what's crazy about this is also at the same time, I guess we should have mentioned they picked up Phil Jackson as a coach for this three-peat. So this was Phil Jackson's third three-peat, and Kobe gave a lot of credit to his career to Phil Jackson, a lot in his books and stuff. You can go back and look, but this is also, as this is going on, there was this weird awkwardness between him and Shaq was starting to fester. It was the weirdest storyline, of these years. And it was all because Kobe wouldn't just put on the facade. Like Kobe had no problem admitting, and he said it, all the way through. Shaq was a coworker. I mean, Kobe never backed down from that. In the media, he never said, "Oh no, we're best buddies." We were just and Shaq, felt the same way about Kobe. I think the root of it was always Shaq probably thought that Kobe was a little too intense, like didn't see the big picture. And I don't know if that's not true about young Kobe, just from what I know about him and being a young person, not, that could have very well been true, that he was a little too focused on the career, so to speak. And Kobe, I think, held it against Shaq a little bit, obviously, that if basketball wasn't the end of the world, even as good as he was at it and as hard as he played. I don't think every summer Shaq did everything he could to get better at basketball.
Well, think about this. I mean, we talk about Shaquille O'Neal and how he evolved as a player. When the Los Angeles Lakers acquired Shaquille O'Neal, it did not take very long for his body type to change. You know what I mean? Like when we talk about Orlando Shaq, he's kind of along the same lines of maybe even a Giannis build, for his time, where he's tall, he's strong, he's lanky, he's, rugged. He's a physical freak of nature.
Yeah.
And to his credit, I mean, the body change didn't slow him down at all, really, as far as like how dominant he was. If anything, it might have made him a little better. But I mean, if you look at the way Kobe conducted himself his entire career, he was a veteran when he came into the league. And when you're an established player like a Shaquille O'Neal and you're being held accountable by a pup,
That's a great point.
That has to rub you the wrong way, because we talk about this in sports, we talk about this, in military. You have to earn the ability to be able to do things. And Kobe was just like, no, like, not that he's entitled, but he will hold you accountable, but he will hold himself to that same standard, and as a vet who's accomplished, who's not just a basketball player, but a celebrity, like, you're appearing in like you're going to WCW to
he was making movies at the time.
You're in video, Shaq Fu, like all that, you got all these things happening. And Kobe's like, bro, you're here, you're getting paid to play basketball. Let's be a basketball player. And Shaq's like, bro, we're winning, like, let me have fun.
And to piggyback on that, to pick on, Shaq a little bit, he handles himself that way in broadcasting too. I'm just being honest. Like,
I'm not mad at it.
He gets paid a lot to do what he does, but I don't necessarily would consider him an analyst. As
he's not my go-to source of information for basketball.
Yeah, and who knows what I think. Okay, if those two never cross paths, I think that Kobe has a way better career than Shaq does. Does that make any sense? I really think that everything you said, even though Shaq, I don't think was a big fan of it, I think he absolutely needed that guy, and Kobe adapted to playing with a guy like Shaq, which isn't super easy if you're a scorer. It's not a natural melt there for two guys, ball dominant guys. Or Shaq's not really a ball dominant guy, but he needs a ball in his hand.
Yeah.
And Kobe really, really needed the ball in his hand. And for them to work that out as a duo and play as good as they did really it was a 5-6 year run that was amazing. We'll talk about the 04 team here in a second. Matter of fact,
if they find and here's the thing, if they find a way just to put their differences aside, man, like, you could be talking about, a Boston Celtics-esque run, where they're just,
and they would have added good players too, the way the NBA was structured then. So okay, well, let's talk about the 03-04. I called it the 03-04 disaster, and then we'll do some of those what ifs, and maybe we can figure out what happened there. So they're coming off the historic run, 3 of the best seasons anybody's ever seen. Now, we all know that Kobe wants to win at least 6. All the whether it's LeBron or whether it's Steph or whoever, they want to win 6 because of Mike. But Kobe wanted to win 13, and I don't really know that.
He wanted to at least win 7.
Yeah, Kobe absolutely. He'll admit that. He admitted that. I'm sorry about that. So they go in the 03-04 season, and this got weird. This is when they bring in Gary Payton, Karl Malone. They tried to build
Byron Russell is another one.
Oh my gosh, Byron Russell.
Horace Grant.
Yeah, they tried to string together this weird, odd veteran super team of a bunch of guys. I'll just say it, chasing rings. Malone was absolutely chasing the ring. So was Payton. And they thought they could just, and rightfully so. Like, it makes sense that I could jump on a team with Kobe and Shaq, and I've got a good chance of winning a ring. And they go into the 03-04 season. The season's all right. Kobe has the Denver incident. Now, I won't dig too deep into that because, in all honesty, I just wasn't there. It went through the legal proceedings. Everything got worked
went away.
Yeah, and I honestly, like, I just can't speak on it because I wasn't there. I can only go by court records and things like that. There was an incident in Denver. You guys can look it up. There's plenty of podcasts on it. Kobe had court hearings in Denver, and he was going to court hearings during the NBA playoffs, the 04 playoffs, and it was a huge distraction. This was as far as the on the court stuff and the basketball stuff, I remember Kobe's sponsors all cut him. I remember, I believe it was Adidas at the time. They cut ties with Kobe.
This is almost like if you're too young to remember this, you might remember what happened with. I'm not saying it's the same situation, but Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods. Yep. It
Same
was huge.
thing. Mm-hmm.
It was huge, and NBA players are naturally, everybody's always waiting for them to fall. Like, I'll just be totally honest. If you're not a big basketball fan, they're just kind of predisposed. They want these guys to fail. And Kobe wasn't super likable anyway. And I mean likable in the way that he wasn't cuddly. Kobe wasn't cuddly. I shouldn't say he wasn't likable.
He was feuding with his I don't know who the Batman and Robin on this team is, if there is such a thing, maybe, one's the Dark Knight and one's the world's greatest detective. I don't know, but like they have two Batmans on this team and they're not getting along.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of it. So people are kind of dividing, like, whose side are you on? Are you a Shaq guy or are you a Kobe guy? And Shaq is the huggable teddy bear that you see on cereal boxes. Yep. He's the guy.
Out of my mouth. So Shaq had the advantage there, even though I think that if this happened now, Steven, as us, as part of the sports network and stuff as analysts, I think we would have saw through some of that. As where I don't know if I did then. I'm not saying that I always give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and I believe in, this is private stuff. Let the legal system work it out, whatever. And they did that. But this was huge. This was the big thing. So a lot of turmoil. Kobe's flying back and forth to Denver to go to court cases. He's coming back. And keep in mind, he's not a veteran player at this time. He's 8 years into the league, and this is happening.
Mm-hmm. 7 years. This was a seventh season.
Seventh season.
Even younger.
Remember, he came in at 17, so he's 24 years old. This is happening. So let's keep in mind, this is a 24-year-old man going through this. Huge distraction. Of course, once again, Steven touched on it. Shaq's the big teddy bear that's, it couldn't be Shaq's fault. He's too much fun. And then they run into one of the most unique teams in NBA history, this 04 Pistons team. They were put together. They were maniacal. They were great defenders. They were built to stop an older team like the Lakers. The Lakers really just it was just a wrong team at the wrong time for a Lakers team.
Well, look at this, Jeff. Before they even get there, they play against the Houston Rockets, who we know at this time, like, still a really good team. 4-1 against the Rockets, 4-2 against the San Antonio Spurs, 4-2 against Kevin Garnett's Minnesota Timberwolves.
Wow.
And then they run into this.
That was Kevin Garnett's, was that his, when they had the number 1 seed? Was it that year?
I believe so. Yeah. Because they played him in the Western Conference Finals. Yeah.
It probably was.
No, the Lakers were the 1 seed. Lakers were the 1 seed. Yeah.
Okay. But still, Minnesota's really good.
Really good.
And this Detroit team was just vicious. And I can remember when that final started, watching it and thinking, literally, it was kind of like a few years ago, if anybody remembers, when Golden State, the last championship against the Cavs, to where it was like, this is said and done. Where this isn't, it's not worth watching. And the Pistons win. And I remember Tayshaun Prince stood out, Rip Hamilton. Like, what is happening?
Tayshaun Prince had a big moment. Chauncey Billups is Mr. Big Shot. Ben Wallace is your defensive, player of the year.
Yep.
Like, this is where he's like really gaining momentum. And then you got Antonio McDyess, a former Laker Lindsey Hunter on the team. So you got Corliss Williamson is another Arkansas guy. So, you kind of notice a theme. I like the Pistons and I like the Suns. So, they had my Arkansas guys. I was actually born in the same city as Corliss. So, I love Corliss, but, I mean, the Lakers, they only win 1 game against Larry Brown, who again is a great coach, but they have Phil Jackson. I mean, if you stack this roster up, this is like the Mavs, 7 seasons later.
Yeah. How big of a to get off Kobe for just 1 second, how big of a mark is this against the Karl Malone? Because Karl Malone was a starter that year. He wasn't just a guy sitting on the bench chasing a ring. Karl Malone doesn't wear anything for this season. And Kobe and Karl don't get along, or didn't get along. Sorry.
Karl Malone's also in his 18th season.
Oh, yeah.
at this point. So
yeah. But I'm just saying, as far as
there's
chasing
only
the ring,
one
it doesn't
person to
work.
do. There's only one person to do what he's doing at the age right now. It's LeBron James. Like
Yeah.
Karl Malone is no LeBron James. You know what I mean?
Oh, so I just want to pick on Karl Malone a little bit because I can't stand him.
I totally get it.
Yeah. Keep your eye on the ball, Carl. So and then I wonder too. We spoke on it how Kobe was he was the driving force of the team through the three-peat. Do you think that this is where it showed up that Shaquille O'Neal needed that guy, and then when Kobe was, the fact of the matter is, he was distracted. There's no way to deny what was happening. And then when you started pulling him a little bit away and he couldn't focus as much, that Shaq couldn't pick up the pieces and rally that team to a victory. I think that it says a lot about that. And then essentially what happens after this series is, that this is the breakup. I called it the breakup.
Yeah.
And you had to pick sides. A lot of things were going. Essentially, it was, we're going to keep Shaq or we're going to keep Kobe. I'm sorry.
This is right. I mean, fitting to the 90s. The time. This is Ross and Rachel. Like
yeah, there you go.
This is Ross Geller and Rachel Green. Like who do you think was right about the whole break situation? Yep. And to your point about Kobe being gone, isn't it just weird how it rubbed Shaq the wrong way that Kobe would ride him so hard and he would be like, no, dude, like let's focus about basketball. But in the one season since Kobe was drafted and they were ever teammates, that Shaq needed to be the absolute no doubt guy, that he was like, bro, like this sucks. And this gets into what we always talk about when we say how important are positions and stuff like that. Really, like if the center is your best player, and this is where we started seeing it at this time, centers used to be it. You had to have a big center to win rings, but like getting to that early 2000s, Shaq is great for his position. He went on to win a ring later, but like he had to have another perimeter creator, facilitator in Dwayne Wade in order to do that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's what I was getting at exactly. This was the one season that I mean, not even the one season, the one series, just a series. And that's a good point to bring up. This was the series that changed the NBA. When people were like, "Oh, wait a minute, we don't have to have Olajuwon, Shaq, David Robinson, these guys to win a championship." I really think that changed how teams could build. That's a great point. This was kind of the end of that era. In all honesty, I mean, we were losing the classic centers and transforming into something completely different. Yes, Shaq did, go on a couple years later to win with Miami. He was good, but he doesn't do it without Wade.
Exactly.
That's a good point. And that's how I feel about it. We talk about Ross and Rachel. I sided with Kobe on this for everything you said. I don't love the Denver situation, but that's a different story. But as far as I thought that Shaq kind of let his team down, and Kobe let his team down too. I mean, I do understand that, but just I always thought that Kobe was all in, and I never believed that out of Shaq. And if you look at how Shaq really finished his career, I know that bigger guys don't play as long, but I mean, he fell off quick. There's no way you can tell me he was as dedicated after that, especially after he got that fourth ring. And when he won it, he cared more about winning one more than Kobe than he did anything else.
I think that he cared that he won one without Kobe, more so than right. And I know that we're basically saying the same thing, but I think focusing in on like, I'm going to prove Kobe wrong. Like, I think that's what we're both speaking to is like, I did this without Kobe. But again, we just talked about, you had another guy who is the isolationist, spectacular athletic freak of nature in Dwayne Wade.
Yeah. And about the same, because Wade was a little older. He's about the same age as when Shaq played with Kobe. And I know they made each other better, but and a little of me is a little bitter towards Shaq because I think he takes a lot more credit for what he did in the NBA than I don't know. I just he just thinks that he was basically he puts himself in a category that I don't know that I think he was in.
He's a great. So here's the thing: all-time great player.
All-time.
But I think what you're getting at, Jeff, is like there's what the kids say. There's levels to this, right?
Yeah.
And when we're looking at like what Kobe did for basketball compared to Shaq, Shaq in his own right, he has his own niche. He's the most imposing force in basketball history.
Oh yeah.
You can't say that about Kobe, but you can say Kobe might be the most cerebral player in NBA history. And that's saying a lot because there's a lot of cerebral guys in the NBA history.
I'd say he's up there with LeBron, guys like that really
MJ.
see the game different. Yeah, really see the game different. So after this, Shaq leaves. He goes to Miami. So we have the 05, the 06, 07 seasons, which is crazy because I remember when I started looking back at this, in my mind, there was 10 years that Kobe's teams failed. That's just in my mind. I was like, oh, I remember all them years that it was 05, 06, 07.
Time is so weird when we think about NBA history. Like things feel so far away. They feel so close together, but it's always different from what you initially think.
Yeah. And so these 3 seasons after Shaq leaves, Kobe switches to 24, which was unprecedented.
One more than Jordan.
Yeah. And he plays the rest of his career with 24. It was still crazy. I remember switching to 24 and thinking like, what is happening here? But he stuck with it and was great with it, obviously. So this is when Kobe says, all right, I got this, and becomes he has 2 or 3 years. He's one of the best scorers we've ever seen in the history of the NBA for a few years here. Just amazing stuff. Absolutely unstoppable scorer.
By necessity, too. Like, look at what we're doing right now with Curry, and I think that he just broke Kobe's record of most games with like 30 consecutive games with 30 points in a row.
Wow.
But we're praising Steph Curry right now because we recognize that he doesn't have talent around him, and he's another lovable, likable guy. He's smaller than most other stars, so he feels like like he's winning for us. You know what I mean? Like he's one of just these regular guys out there just killing it. But Kobe's basically did the same thing at this time, and we hated him for it. We called him a ball hog. Just
a ball hog. Yeah. See. Yeah, I remember. I totally I wasn't totally on that side, but I just kind of lost track of him. It was so weird. This was, LeBron had just come into the league. Wade had just come into the league. That 03 class was fantastic. And it was just
Jordan is gone now.
Yeah, he's totally gone. And we didn't cover, but the games, there just wasn't as many games on TV. So I couldn't, the Lakers were on at 10:30 every night. I didn't watch a lot of the games. I didn't appreciate what was happening. Every morning on SportsCenter, Kobe had another 30, 40 points or whatever. So this was
Smush
just
Parker and Chris Mim and Kwame Brown.
Right. It was almost like he was training himself for the next. I always think he totally knew what the plan was. And he knew that when the players got there, then he was going to be the next level scorer. And of course it was 100% right. It's just, it was such a weird thing. Like I say, I thought it was 10 years and it just wasn't. So I'll look at the per games here for a few of these years. So in 05, 06, he's 35 points a game. 35 a game is crazy. 06, 07, he's 31. And then, 07, 08, we'll start talking about when things were coming around, 28, 26, 27. It just crazy. I mean, the guy for the rest of his career was just an absolute scoring machine for someone that played defense that well. I think that's very important to remember. He's 12-time all defensive player. And I say this a lot about Jordan, coincidentally, that he also took away points from the other team. They weren't empty points. It's just, I really wish I could go back and enjoy the games like I should have been. I really do. Just an historic run. And I always think he was training himself to be, to this next phase of his career. And sure enough, here we go. So 2008 through 2010, I called them the Kobe years.
Yeah.
Because once again, it felt like it was never going to happen again. Kobe's back in the finals. He loses to the Boston team.
Celtics.
Yeah, the Celtics that put
Boston
Allen and
three-party.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not a super team. Like it just let nobody will admit that they assembled a team.
I will. I mean, you
Like
also their bench. At several points they had got like Shaq ended up being a Celtic, not during this time, but like, he had Kendrick Perkins, Rajon Rondo, who has won championship with the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers.
Wow.
You James Posey, Swiss Army knife defender, 3-and-D guy. I mean, you got Eddie House is just a sniper from outside. Doc Rivers is your coach.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's not a super team.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it was organically put together too. Yeah. Ray Allen just happened to wind up there, whatever. So, but anyway,
Paul Pierce was there.
Yeah. Paul Pierce was there. Yeah. So, but nonetheless, a great Celtics team.
Of course,
want to say that they needed it. It wasn't, they didn't draft all 11 players. Let's just put it that way. So they beat Kobe in the finals in 2008. And then, Kobe wins the next two, right?
Yep.
2009 and then 10 championships without Shaq, with his team. A great, not that they didn't have a great starting lineup, a really good team. And I always thought, I guess I'll ask your thoughts on Gasol, but I always thought he played better. Him and Gasol, in my mind, that's the duo that I think of as far as when I think of Kobe Bryant, I think of him and Gasol.
I mean, I'm not going to say that Gasol, like, I know that you're probably not saying this just to clear it up, though. Gasol is clearly not a better individual player than
No.
But what Paul Gasol was able to do was he wanted to be at that same level as Kobe Bryant. Paul Gasol was not a guy, and I think initially when he first got there, he was so used to being the guy in Memphis that did take a while. He wasn't at Kobe's level yet when he first came in. But as they worked through that first season together, and then they came back and then they won their 2 consecutive rings, that second season, Powell he was on another level. He loved that triangle offense. He embraced his role. He and Kobe spoke Spanish together on the court so they could have their own secret language in order to get some sort of competitive. Like if you're so good at basketball that you're just like, how can we separate ourselves even more? Let's speak a different language
a different language than most of the other guys.
That maybe one other player on the other team might be able to understand. You know what I mean? So like,
and personally, this was the time to where I really appreciated the Kobe Bryant thing, and I really liked these teams. I felt genuinely good when they won. Of course, I hated the Celtics; and still do, but I felt good, when the Lakers won. I thought it was good. I think Kobe evolved a lot in those years. I think, he wasn't the player in 2004 that he thought he was, just like Shaq wasn't. And I think in, 8, 9, 10, he was, it was important for him to learn maybe the grass isn't greener situation too. And, just becoming an older adult and all that. And, Denver behind him and perspective and all these things all came together. And that's why I called him Kobe's years, to where he was scoring at will. He's the best player in the league, regardless of MVPs and all that. He was probably the best player in the league. I know LeBron at this point is really starting to take off, but he's not the best player in the league.
Yeah. That baton hadn't passed yet. And like what you're talking about as Kobe growing, and I want to bring this up, is that he's getting to the point where the athleticism is not the same. He's like, this is by no means like we're seeing old man Kobe in a walker or anything like that. But
we saw Jordan do the same thing.
He started training with Hakeem Olajuwon in the offseason because he wanted to get better at backing down his opponent. I mean, that fadeaway mid-range, that post game up, and like he was so good around the basket. If you were defending Kobe that night, you knew that his back was going to be on you about maybe 60 to 70% of the game.
Yep.
And he like the great posts that we were just talking about of the 80s and the 90s. Now he as a guard was doing that, and that's something that you don't see when you go play the Boston Celtics or when you go play the Phoenix Suns or the Spurs or anyone else. Like, not anyone had a guard that was doing what Kobe Bryant was doing.
The only one that I can ever remember, it's crazy, is Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan is one of the best post players in the history of the NBA, and Kobe did the same thing. It's almost, I won't say it's gone now, but I mean, you do not see that. Right now it's a different game.
There's a couple points that do it. It's not as fully it's not embraced the way that it was then.
We'll touch on those, a couple of those here in a minute. That's a great point to bring up about Kobe's post play. And I said this about Jordan, a while back. Kobe was, the same way. He would have played in this game. He would have just shot more threes. He would have been he was a good 3-point shooter, but he would have just been an excellent 3-point shooter.
He's 17th all times and made threes already when it wasn't a point of emphasis.
Accidentally. I mean, that's what I said. There was no time he couldn't play. There was no area he couldn't play in. There was no team he couldn't play for. He would have molded to, and he would have been great in the 50s. He'd have been great in the 2050s. It's just the truth. Just he could do everything. I can remember, we couldn't even touch on all the highlights through these playoff runs of the big shots he made. A lot of them were 3-pointers. A lot of them there was a half quarters in there. It was just, there was no shot he couldn't make, or there's no shot he wouldn't take either, though. Let's be honest. That was part of his game.
You knew who was getting the ball when it mattered the most.
Yeah. As good as he was, because he could play defense, it made up for a lot of that. He's not the most efficient player in NBA history, but it's hard to be when you have to score that many points for your team. So it's skewed, but
he ushered in, like I said earlier, that hero ball era where efficiency was like, if you hit, 12 of 18 shots, that's cool, but like, if you were 13 of 31, we still won the game. Yep. Great. Thanks.
Absolutely. They still didn't want you to shoot it. And that's why you put rebounders around you and things like that. I mean, the 98 Bulls lived on that, rebounding and missed shots and things like that. So
when you had Lamar Odom, Pau Gasol, and Andrew Bynum as your front court, like you were going to get rebounds. I mean, you're talking about an all 7-footer lineup there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was just, but I really did like those years, and it was cool to see the culmination of the career. Selfishly, I'm glad he got one more than Shaq. If I'm being honest, I know it sounds like I'm bashing on Shaq because I don't like him that much. I don't think he's a bad person or anything. I
don't like him as an analyst. I liked him as a player, but as an analyst,
yeah, he was a good player, but he left a little bit out there. He left a little bit out there.
We watched the game at different points in our lives too, Jeff. So like you understood it more as an adult.
He's slightly older than me, so it does change it. And I said that a lot about the way I feel about Kobe, where I was a year, 2 years older. So I saw his career differently than like my son saw it.
Yeah, so 6 years old, like I'm growing up with Kobe.
And I had Jordan. And that's why I fight a guy on the street, over Jordan LeBron, but it's because of how impressionable we are. That's when I realized, and I think that's probably why by the time the 09-10 teams came around, I've got a 13-year-old kid at this point. So I'm a different person too than when Kobe comes into the league in 96. And so I start to realize like, oh, okay, this is called maturing. This is called growing. This is called, building yourself, as a man, because he was male or woman, if it's the woman side. So I think I appreciated all that more. And it's, especially with the research I did this week, it's grown deeper. So he's went from not even in my list of like 10 athletes I ever liked to someone that I really, really, really appreciate now and wish I wouldn't have underestimated what they did so much. But that's on me. I mean, it's not like, I'm the one that overlooked the greatness, not everybody else. So
his career is the same, no matter if you look at it as a hater or a lover of it. It's the same.
There you
thing.
go. No, you're exact. I never threw any shade on it or any of that. I was never, you know me well enough that I don't just make things up. So that's a good point. But
there was at least respect it.
Yes, 100%. Actually, because my son's the one that was like, no, this guy's awesome and all this. So kind of made me take a second look. And then, so I got to enjoy the 9 and 10 seasons for what they were and appreciate the greatness of it. I never had a problem admitting, a lot of people will even say that if you just look at on the court, he did it better than Jordan because he took what Jordan did.
Saying earlier.
Yeah. Now they did it in different eras, so we really don't know. But he didn't do it worse. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And that probably, and once we talked about that kind of holds him back in the conversation because they're like, well, how can we say, if we can't have both, we can't have Jordan and Kobe be 1 and 2 because it's just not as much fun. Because you're like, oh, wait a minute, every 6'6" shooting guard he comes in and plays from like you say, plays from the elbow. Like, so what's it? So I think that what's Ron Harper 4? So it's just and it's just the way it is. But Kobe and Jordan had a pretty good relationship, so it's not like there was a lot of animosity there or whatever.
No, we saw that in The Last Dance. We saw that Kobe was that number 8. He's going to be a problem.
Yeah,
and we see now that he's there's a lot going on. His he's going to MJ's going to be inducting Kobe Bryant to the Hall of Fame. I have my own speculation. I'm not breaking news, but like we also found out recently that Nike's contract with the Bryant family,
they let it expire. Correct?
They let it expire. I'm of the mindset that I wouldn't be surprised at all if Jordan Brand doesn't pick up the Bryant estate portion of the his the sneakers, right? Like I think that would be excellent. Yeah.
It's a tough situation. There's certain ways to do it. There's nothing. It's hard to take something great out of this. I don't know. But that makes sense. And I hope so. I would like to see Jordan being the icon that he is. I would like to see him. I think that helps give validity to Kobe's career. All the things that I said about older guys like me that don't have that attachment. That's something that Jordan can be like, no. You've got to watch. You've got to watch this guy. He was, and that really does help when. The opposite of what we talk about Shaq and Barkley all the time that are always killing the next guys and trying to.
I was going to mention that. I was going to
undermine their career. It is cool to see them realize that how legendary, because the guys that played on the court know exactly how good Kobe was. They will never deny. You won't hear one person come up with a flaw in his game. He was just a step above everybody. He was just different cerebrally, like you said, physically. Just and do yourself a favor, anybody. Just go watch, even if you just go watch Kobe's all-time dunks. There's some things in there that they're not even human for somebody that knew that much about the game. It's a little like LeBron, kind of a comparison there to where, wait a minute, you can't be the most physically gifted and the smartest player on the court. That's just not fair. So
when we had Ronnie Brewer Jr. on our show, he was talking a little bit. He came into the league as a defender, and he was drafted by the Utah Jazz under the late great Jerry Sloan, and he immediately was a part of some successful teams. By his second season, he was starting. And I liked Ronnie because he went to the University of Arkansas, and that's a recurring thing for me. But he was a defender, and he shared a little bit about his toughest assignments, and automatically Kobe Bryant was among, if not the first guy that he talked about, because a good night for you as a Kobe defender is 25 points. Like if you kept him maybe a point or two below his average, you were like, I did what I was supposed to do that night. You know what I mean? Like if you kept him in the low to mid 20s, like, all right, I feel like I did pretty good against Kobe, but it's just such a different level with players. You're talking about the 1% of the 1%.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's amazing. So then you got the 11 through 13 seasons were rough. This was, things, the team, which, what he just, you got the 2 championships are coming off that. You had some injuries in there.
A little nagging things. Powell started getting a little hurt too, slowing down. Lamar stuff going on.
But what was different about this time is it didn't feel it felt like Kobe was not okay with it, but like, okay, he accepted it. He always said that he was going to, at this point, we'll talk in a minute. We'll talk about some of the possible trades and stuff. But at this point, he was going to finish out as a Laker. I'm a Laker. That's how it's going to be. I think he understood. And plus by this time, now you've got LeBron at full steam. You've got Wade. The writing was on the wall. You were going to compete with these teams. The Spurs were still kicking it. It was just kind of that time. And then, so we move into the 14 through 16 seasons, which I just kind of call the goodbye tour. He hurt his Achilles in there. The famous, it was still one of the most unbelievable things I've ever seen in sports. What was it? Was it 14 or 15 when he?
I think it was 15 when you're talking about the Achilles, and then he went and hit the game-winning, or he finished his free throw routine.
Yeah, he tears his Achilles on a drive. I mean, it's done. But he goes out and shoots the free throws and limps off the court. But he wouldn't retire that way. So he rehabs his Achilles and comes back and plays, his last season in the NBA. And in his last game, I believe he scored fifth. It was just the anniversary was just the other day, as a matter of fact. And I believe he scored
60. He scored 60.
He scored 60.
A mild 60 point.
I don't care if it's just me and a hoop. I would have trouble scoring 60 points in the night. So it ended. It kind of ended perfectly. Which, if you would have asked somebody in 2004 how this was going to go, nobody would have guessed that's how it was going to go. Nobody guesses. Oh, Kobe gets, 2 more with the Lakers, finishes out as he's the greatest Laker ever. I'll say it. He is. No, apologies to Magic Johnson and all that, but
by the way, that's
saying more than a lot. Even if you want to say he's one of the best, I'll take that with the Lakers. As growing up a Lakers fan, I'll take it.
Without controversy, he's top 3.
There you go. There we could agree on that. So it was weird to see, and that's another one of those things when it finally came down to the end and he was leaving. I'm like, whoa, what did I just see? And it's going to happen with LeBron just because LeBron's been around so long. That's where we talked about Shaq. Just kind of, I don't know. Shaq had those weird years with the Cavaliers and the Celtics and the Suns, and it just kind of faded out as to Kobe went out a completely different direction, and at this point he was a living legend on the court. So everybody recognized, just like LeBron is now, this guy is in the next room of the Hall of Fame and he's still playing against us. So imagine you come in, rookies are coming in playing against Kobe, who were basically born when Kobe starts playing basketball.
His team. I mean, you got guys like Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle coming in.
Right. Yeah.
When they're just pups. And Jeff, I want to point something out to you.
No, you go ahead, man.
When you're talking about this goodbye tour, what kind of helped reinforce whatever disdain or whatever Kobe just doesn't get it mentality is in 2013 he signs a 3-year $90 million contract. So that's a lot of money, and they're just
that'll do it.
They're just getting over their championship window, and this is basically just an admission of defeat. We're not going to be competitive. We'll have Kobe Bryant, so we'll be competitive on a nightly basis. But if we're talking big picture, we're not going to be challenging for rings. We might make the playoffs, we might, make the conference finals, whatever. But this reinforced a little bit of Kobe Bryant's a vet. He should be taking pay cuts. He should be allowing these younger guys that are taking over the NBA now to want to come to LA and start escorting them in there. And that just further drove it in. I remember even watching this. I'm like, what are you do? Just stupidly, what are you doing taking $90 million? Why aren't you, taking a pay cut or whatever? But Kobe's no, I've earned this. I've brought 5 rings here. I'm gonna retire the way that I want to retire. I'm gonna set me and my family up for generational success. I have stuff that I'm gonna do out of the NBA that we weren't aware of at the time.
Right.
So we're looking at this as this is just regular old selfish Kobe Bryant.
Yep. That's a good point.
But we saw, and again, the contrast that you brought up with Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq's signing veteran minimum contracts. He's doing the right thing that you're supposed to do as a veteran. He's going to these teams as the missing piece. He's going to help. LeBron James get a ring. I'm here to get a ring for the king, is what he said when he went to Cleveland. he went to Boston to try to help them regain relevancy. There was rumors that San Antonio was trying to get him. So again, we're mirroring these two guys and how they exited the NBA. Just regular old selfish Kobe Bryant, only in it for himself. And then Shaq's like, I'm going to go help a team win. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be the savvy vet.
Yep. No, that's a great point. That was, it's everything you said is wonderful. And that's exactly how it was perceived. The difference between the perception of Kobe and I think what
the reality
in the few years that he had after he retired, and the reality was so drastic. And we've touched on a lot of us on the court. The Denver stuff was hard to get around. That's just the truth of it. But we also realize that he's not the only flawed person that ever lived, and it's a shame that he didn't have to tell anybody, that's everything he was doing, like you said, outside of whatever. But it is a shame that obviously for circumstances beyond anyone's control, we never got to see the full evolution of Kobe Bryant, which is a shame. But everything you said there is exactly right, and it's kind of touches on the short-sightedness of sports fans sometimes, and that's not a negative. That's just how we devour sports. I mean, that's what we do. We do it for a living too, and we try not to prey on that. But the truth is, a lot of sports is caught up in the moment, overreaction, and things like that. And he's one of these players that's hard to say. Everybody knows he's a legend, but he also might be underrated, and he also might be underappreciated. It's insane to say for a guy that it's 100% lock, top tier, greatest. I don't care who makes the list. He's top 10 of all time. I don't care who makes the list. But it's still weird to say that maybe he's underappreciated for what he accomplished on the court. It's just a very unique, but that was his choice, and that what's crazy as I listened to the interviews this week leading up to this, try to get a feel for it, was he was very open. He's one of the more open legends that I've ever listened to. A lot of guys I listen to when I do these shows, they're given an interview, but there's typically an agenda. Like they might have just started a new business, or they've got a book out. Most of these interviews, Kobe would come on and they would ask him questions and he would give honest answers. And it's kind of, it sounds weird, but it was kind of refreshing to me. He swore, he swore on podcasts and stuff. But to me, for someone that swears, there's this odd genuineness to it when he's talking about other players. And
he's a real person,
It really, really was. And I thought, just like Jordan, like most of Jordan's career, me and my wife talked about this a little bit. A lot of Jordan's career was a facade. Jordan put on a facade.
Or Hulk Hogan, rather.
Yeah. If you look at Jordan post basketball, that was more of the real Jordan. He got divorced right away. He was not that I'm shaming him for getting divorced, but I'm saying that the picture that he put out there wasn't exactly the real Jordan. And a lot of athletes do that, as to where, looking back now, I realize that Kobe was the opposite, and that I thought he was being disingenuous, and I thought he was always sneaking around. I thought he was always hiding something. But it turns out I don't think he was at all. Listening to him talk, and it's pretty cool to, and the most credit I give is to any I said the same thing about Iverson when we did his show. He gives credit to the modern player.
Oh my goodness.
He did several interviews to where he said he likes today's game. He, guys like Steph Curry and the new wave of players, he appreciated it and he liked it and he gave him credit and compliments.
Trained with them.
Yeah. And he was there for him and he talked to him and he recognized the evolution of the game, but he didn't undermine it. He didn't try to squash it or to make him.
He's clearly better than a lot of the guys that came after him, right? But he never once, but it's weird, right, with Kobe, because I remember you were talking about the interviews, whenever they're up in the finals and people are like, well, Kobe, why don't you smile? You should be happy. Y'all are right. He's like, is the job finished? Are we finished? Did we win?
Yeah.
Like, he was business, and then the whole Matt Barnes incidents where they were playing against the Magic and he pump faked the ball in Kobe's face. He's like, I wish you would,
Yeah.
As an analyst, Kobe, or an interviewer, right? Kobe is everything that you ever want out of a player because he will tell you what you need to hear, and you don't have to dig. You don't have to, clickbait him. He brings it all on, and it's an intelligent thought too. That's the other thing. I think people he came out of high school. He didn't do it the traditional route. He didn't go to college, so he's an uneducated person. But dude, I think was speaking Mandarin, just for fun. And that's one of the more difficult languages in the world. But Kobe was just always so raw and authentic, and it's just so like you said, it's underappreciated. And he was a guy that he was confident in himself, but if you're asking him what he thought of himself, he would tell you I'm the best in the world. But if you talk about this other player, he's a terrific player. You know what I mean? You didn't have to do both. You didn't have to cut one guy down to build yourself up.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I'm glad you touched on it. I had a lot of fun this week. I listened to he was on Matt Barnes' podcast. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to it or not, and they discussed it. Really, really cool. And that's why Kobe recruits Matt Barnes to the Lakers because of that incident. And he told Matt Barnes, if you're crazy enough to F with me, then you can be on my team. That's what he told him. So that
world peace being on the team, he was like, hey bro, you're crazy like me, man. Let's go get this ring.
Yeah. Just it's amazing. I mean, you could go on for hours talking about it, on the court, off the court, all the things. It's an historic career. And what was neat about it is you knew it was historic as you were watching it. And that's rare. You don't get that with every player that you recognize. Some guys, say Kevin Garnett, he's kind of like after it's said and done, you're like, oh, wow, what were we seeing, when Kevin Garnett was there? I think I undervalued him. And Kobe, it got to the point late in his career to where I'm like, no, I know exactly where he's at in history, and just like I am with LeBron right now. So let's do that. I know, you have a top 50 or top 100 NBA all-time players.
I think it's more than 100, but yeah, I have
over 100 now.
I have a running spreadsheet of players that I've ranked. It's 133 that I have.
Let's talk about, I already know, but let's talk about where you have Kobe and why, because you're just, it's hard to explain how awesome, your database is, how thought out it is. And this is basically yours. Could we say it as far as who had the best?
As far as
you go ahead,
it's not who I think would win 1 versus 1. You know what I mean? It's career wise, I take accolades, where they stand all time in certain statistics, their careers, their rings, MVPs, stuff like that. And I try my very, very best. I'm not flippant. I just don't copy paste and just look at other lists and flip them around or what have you. I put a lot of effort into it, but as far as where I have Kobe, and again, I love Kobe to death. I have him 8th all time. Okay. And just to let you know where I have him in relation to his peers, number 1, I have Michael Jordan. Right now I have Kareem number 2, but I suspect that here soon it will be LeBron James, who I have 3rd. I have Bill Russell 4th. Wilt Chamberlain 5th, Magic Johnson 6th, and this is probably the more controversial one, but I have Tim Duncan over Kobe Bryant. And if you wanted to argue that I should have him 7th and not 8th, I'm not going to sit here and call you crazy. You know what I mean?
It's actually amazing. We didn't touch on it. It wasn't a rivalry, but that those two played in the same. They were peers. It's amazing. We didn't even really touch on that, but the San Antonio Lakers thing for a long time was huge, and Kobe versus Duncan was a real thing. I hadn't even really thought about that, but I understand your rankings though, and I would never quit. I know what kind of work you put into them and stuff, and I could go, like you say, I could Google rankings and get them, but I know what you put into yours. I've seen the data. I've seen. Basically
regular season and finals MVPs. So,
Yeah.
that kind of tips it a little bit his way. That's not to say that I think if they were to play one-on-one, obviously, I don't think Tim Duncan beats Kobe Bryant in a one-on-one competition.
Right.
Kobe might be second or third on this list if it's a one-on-one competition.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but here, nobody's going to complain about being the 8th basketball player of all time. I mean, there's no matter who you put at 8th is. It's going to seem like they're too low or too high or whatever. But no, I appreciate your rankings.
I have him over Shaq and Larry Bird, if that helps anyone feel.
It does help because I would not accept Larry Bird over Kobe Bryant. I would have to put a stop to that. I'd have to do it. I will probably not be doing a Larry Bird icon show. Somebody else can do that. I probably need to be.
Jeff, he's our one guy, bro. He's our one legend.
Oh, believe me, I know. I grew up in the 80s. I know all about Larry Bird, the greatest player in the history of the world. Yeah, for sure. Oh man. So yeah, that's I think we covered everything. I mean, we didn't cover everything, but I think we touched on everything. So we started off the show with this. I'll get to you now. What current players, it's hard to say remind you of Kobe, but just similar. I don't even have to say it with someone so good, but just kind of in the same ball.
Who has shades of Kobe?
Same zip code.
Okay. When I look at who's got shades of Kobe, there's different ways you can do this. A lot of people like to say mindset wise that Russell Westbrook reminds them of Kobe.
For the record, Kobe said that too.
Yeah, but
I didn't agree, but
I don't agree when I watch it. I mean, and I'm not going to say that Kobe's wrong in who he thinks reminds him of him, but I don't know. I think Paul Pierce compared someone to him that I was like, really? Like, I don't know. Like, but Kobe, I'm not saying that I'm sorry if I'm rubbing people the wrong way. I'm not saying that Kobe thinks the exact same way as Paul Pierce, but I don't buy the whole Russell Westbrook thing because Kobe, for everything that we've said about him, he wanted the clutch moments and he could hit the clutch moments. Russell Westbrook, not so much. Mindset wise, he wanted it, but he obviously he's not built for the clutch mentally.
And for the record, Kobe did say it in, I believe it was 16 when Oklahoma was at almost did it. So it is a little different.
Yeah, but if there's one player in the NBA right now, and there's actual if you wanted to go YouTube it and see how crazy similar they are play style wise, and it's crazy that I like this guy because I didn't like Kobe growing up. As I said, I respected him, but I wasn't a Kobe guy. But I love Jason Tatum.
I knew it.
I love Jason.
That was my guess.
I love his game. I love everything about him. But again, this is I think this is mature Steven, adult Steven, seeing a kid come in and seeing all the work that they're putting in, seeing past what everything else. But Tatum was viewed as being this great talent coming in, whereas Kobe, Tatum's not threatening anyone's legacy, you know? So I think that's what helps him out. But Tatum, I mean, the fadeaway shots, the hitting, the game winners, not being afraid of the moment, not being afraid to pass the ball either. That's obviously the area I think that he's got to improve in the most, but he's a team guy. The mid-range fadeaways, stuff like that. There's so many aspects of his game that even watching him at Duke, he was a mid-range master, and that reminded me of Kobe so much. And I was like, anyone who takes anyone over Tatum in this draft is going to regret it. And that was when Markelle Fultz was the consensus number one. And I don't have receipts because I wasn't podcasting at the time, but I really did believe in Tatum, and he's proving me right. And I recently did, that top 25 under the age of 25. He was my second guy. I had him over Zion. So I'm really super high on Tatum, and he does remind me. So he wears the purple, mid forearm, sweatband too, that Kobe wore. So he was major. Kobe was such an influence on his game. And if you ask him, he's a Laker fan growing up, I wouldn't be
really?
surprised if he ends up going to LA at some point. But he was a Kobe guy, being a kid, and he trained with Kobe in the off season. And I highly encourage anyone who thinks that I'm crazy, just go look up. They have comparison side by sides, and my goodness, you can tell that Kobe was a big influence on his game.
I feel better because when I put this question on there, I didn't have a guy in mind because typically when I do these shows, I try not to. I know it sounds stupid, but it's kind of what I do because, I have guests on to do this. But Tatum was the guy that I had circled, and I know how much you like him, and that's what got me looking at. I remember about a year ago, we had a Tatum debate on a show, one of our original shows. Well, it probably wasn't a year ago. It's probably 8 months ago. And that really got me looking at him. And that was the guy that I had circled as like, I think this is – because it's tough now because the game is so much different that you almost have to look at the mentality more than the game, because a lot of the stuff that Kobe was great at is fading away from basketball. We talked about it. It'd be a 3-pointer now. That doesn't mean you can't have the same mentality. So I think Tatum's a great pick as far as a young guy that is a complete control of his team. There's no doubt whose team that is.
A lot of people would look at maybe even a Kawhi Leonard, and I'm not mad at that either. But if you're talking about like skill set wise, mid range, the back down, post fadeaways, the defensive mindset too, I see that. But he's also not very demonstrative on the court. You know, like you're not feeling Kawhi get high. You're just like, oh. Yeah. Kawhi's kind of just doing his thing. He's more Tim Duncan in that aspect, being his teammate.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know if Kawhi, I know he can do anything, but I don't know if I can see Kawhi ripping off like say 4 50-point games or there is a next level as to where I think if Tatum wanted to just be a selfish scorer, he could. I think that's a good pick. I mean, there's lots of great players in there. Even a guy like I see shades of it in when I watch Jamal Murray play. How he can get to the just shade like every now and then. But I mean, am I not really comparing him to Kobe, or am I comparing him to
kind of bob in my head? I'm thinking on his game because he doesn't have the build of a Kobe, so I'm trying right. But I mean, yeah. Not afraid of the shot. He feels himself. He can rip off, like you said, for those big performances.
Yeah.
If he was like 2 inches taller, yeah, that's probably what separates it to me.
And of course, I've said this guy is the modern Jordan, several times. So I got to say the same thing. Klay Thompson, like it's like. In the 3-point era, I think this is who Jordan Kobe would be. I will stand by that as far as what he can do on a court. He's been in a different position, but like imagine essentially he's doing with Steph what Kobe did with Shaq.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think Klay. I don't think if you ask Klay in an honest moment under Truth Serum that he thinks Steph is necessarily better than him, but he also realizes that he's was the best for that team when they made those runs. I've always thought that about Klay. So that's kind of how Kobe was. I don't think Kobe ever thought that Shaq was a better player, but he also knew that Shaq had to think he was a better player. So not to be negative towards Steph. I'm not comparing Steph and Shaq, but I'm saying as far as
impact.
You can do a certain thing really, really well, to help your team win and let another player succeed. So a guy like that kind of puts me in mind, but there's not a whole lot.
Jimmy Butler almost maybe kind of being in that mindset too, just personality wise.
A little bit, but just
has that like kind of will himself into big moments,
Sure.
So, but again, we're talking about one of the best ever. It's like who reminds
that's what I mean.
Shaquille O'Neal. Like, do you say Giannis even though he's 100 pounds lighter? Do you say Zion even though he's a foot shorter?
Yeah.
Where do you go with that?
Right, exactly. That's what I mean. We're just talking shades and sprinkles here.
Shades of Kobe, and I wholeheartedly think that the closest thing in the NBA is Tatum.
Yeah, which is amazing because to think that Kobe came while Jordan was still playing, and then now we're like, there's nobody that we got back to back, and then there's nobody even close to those two guys right now. And it's just weird. I mean, they will come. There's always the next guy.
Away from the traditional prototype shooting guard, and now we have these dual forwards, and we have these hybrid posts, and we have these hybrid guards. We have all these different, and shout out to Rashard Phillips for putting these out into my head, because these are his position dictionaries, and I highly encourage anyone to go to 2319.com and go look these up, because we got to get away from point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center.
Absolutely.
The game's not played that way anymore.
Nope. Just like football, the tight end is not a position anymore. It's just the way it is. The same
hybrid receiver.
Yeah. The same things happen with basketball for sure. And I personally love it, but there just isn't another Kobe Bryant. So, man, Steven, that was great, man. I knew you were the perfect guy for this show. Yeah, it was a bittersweet show to do. But like I say, we were celebrating the basketball life of Kobe Bryant, and I'm glad we did. And I'm glad I dug into this. Personally, I really enjoyed my research and the time I spent. And if nothing else, just watching the highlights, you forget. Sometimes you forget these things, and you watch the highlights, and you're like, I don't even understand what I'm seeing right now. It was truly amazing. I want to thank you for coming on. This was a lot of fun, man. I hope you had fun.
I really did. And it's weird being the guy that you chose for Kobe, because like I said, I never really was like a super fan.
Me neither.
But I appreciated him, and I felt like the Maestro commercial where he's directing the crowd and everyone was like, I've been hating you far too long to stop now. He had guys in the crowd singing that song, and that's what I felt like. I never like hated him, but like, again, I was a Suns fan, so like he made me miserable as a fan. He was the bane of my existence.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
So I was like, what do I do now? I don't have there's no more villain of the NBA anymore. And, he was a tremendous player. And man, looking back on it now, like when you criticized him and you saw, and like, tragedy aside, just respecting the game and what he did and what we found out about him afterwards was like, man, if only I would have known. Like, and that's
how I feel.
Like LeBron James now, I kind of felt that same way with LeBron. And I'm not like full of like a LeBron guy, but I'm not as harsh on him as I used to be. And looking at a guy like Kobe and seeing him like my whole life watching basketball and him leaving is like, I need to appreciate guys while they're here playing.
That's how I felt. I had a lot of this odd regret for not knowing, what I missed or wasn't appreciating. But we do live in an era to where, I was able to go back and, and watch games, and those things do live on, and they do help get through it and appreciate it. And that's all you can do. It's none of us can turn back the clock, but for sure, I came away with this with a better appreciation for Kobe Bryant and everything he did for basketball and why he played basketball. So, Steven, I want to thank you for coming on. Everybody go check out the Breaking the Game podcast. He's doing great things over there. If you've listened to this and don't realize, how much love this guy has for the game of basketball, you don't know what you're doing. So check out the Off the Ball Network. Guys are doing great stuff over there. Some big things are happening right now. It's only getting better. And it's we appreciate everybody that listens, everybody that clicks, read our stories. We love the feedback. We love the interaction. We do this for you guys. We try to be respectful, and we try to give you an honest take on sports and not just clickbait. And you guys respond to that, and we really appreciate you all. So I'm going to leave you with a little exit here from Kobe himself. And I want to thank everybody for watching, listening. Steven Gillaspie, I want to thank you for being on. It's been a pleasure. And
thank you, Jeff, for having me on, and just much love, everybody. Appreciate y'all for listening.
Absolutely. Have a great week, everyone.
The
lesson I cherish the most is how
Maybe.
The lesson I cherish the most is how important it is to love what you do. If you love what you do and it's making you happy, all the hard work and perseverance will pay off. I once had a guidance counselor tell me that I shouldn't play basketball, that it would never amount to anything for me.
It was playing, brother.
It was?
Yeah, I heard it.
Okay, let me try it again.
The lesson I cherish the most is how important it is to love what you do. If you love what you do and it's making you happy, all the hard work and perseverance will pay off. I once had a guidance counselor tell me that I shouldn't play basketball, that it would never amount to anything for me. His negativity towards me made me stronger. You can't stop people from trying to limit your dreams, but you can stop it from becoming a reality. Your dreams are up to you. I encourage you to always be curious, always seek out things you love, and always work hard once you find it. So with that, I'll let you carry on with your evening. Please know I'm thinking of you, supporting you, and encouraging you.